Thanks for tuning in to more college football talk on the Our Lads Football Network as we talk SEC football today with Bryan Matthews, who's been covering Auburn Tigers football for, are we almost at 20 years, Bryan?
We are at 20 years.
At 20
So I started
years.
in 2001. So here we are.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm getting old.
Is it how many different outlets? I know you're with Rivals now. So how long have you been with Rivals?
I've been with Rivals almost the whole time. I spent 3 years with 24/7, but Rivals the other 17 years.
Excellent. And of course, anytime we want to talk Auburn Tigers football, Bryan is who we turn to. And this is the first time we're talking SEC football for the season. So mainly we're going to stick with Auburn on this show. Matter of fact, we're going to talk some Florida Gators football tomorrow. And we'll talk more SEC football before the season and during the season here on the OFN. Okay, let's get right to it. And this is, wow, you talk about changes. First, let's talk about Gus Malzahn, Bryan, and his departure, because it seemed like almost every year for those last 3 or 4 years, he was leaving at some point. I'm just guessing it was, okay, maybe he'll turn things around before it gets to a point where the buyout becomes reasonable. And it just never happened. And then once the buyout became reasonable, that was it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. He got a crazy contract after that 2000, I guess it was 19 season. And Auburn got sort of stuck in it. And, it got down to $21.5 million after last season. And I think Auburn, even in the midst of a pandemic and everything else going on, I think they were just ready to make that move. And, when you look back on it, I think it comes down to his record against Alabama, Georgia, LSU, 8-17, 0-13 on the road against Auburn's 3 biggest rivals, 2-5 bowl record. He finished his career at Auburn, or his tenure there, with 7 consecutive seasons with 4 more losses, which is, not what Auburn fans would want. Although, if you pull back and look at the big picture, you know that Auburn's playing in the best conference in the country, and they have to play Georgia and Alabama every year, 2 of the best teams in the country. So it's not going to be easy for any coach, including Gus.
Yeah, it was sort of like, to me, it seemed like, he was the coordinator of their national title team. Yep. Almost won the national championship as a head coach early on. And it's like all of that goodwill lasted a long time until it was just okay. And really, I understand it too, because they were a more dominant kind of program early on, and things. What do you think it was? Was it Gus not changing enough? Everybody else caught up to the system? Was it recruiting? What was the major issue?
I think the things that kept Gus from really taking it to the next level and competing more regularly with Alabama and Georgia. He did have some nice runs in 17 and 19. I think it goes back to recruiting. He really struggled getting good high school offensive tackles, which is still showing up to this day. He struggled recruiting good quarterbacks, and he struggled just recruiting all in all good offensive skill players when you compare them to Alabama and LSU and all the NFL quarterbacks and receivers and running backs they put in the NFL. You go back to 2017, Auburn had a really good running back, Kerryon Johnson. But once he went down with that injury in the Iron Bowl, they had nothing really behind him, and they had no way to compete with Georgia in the SEC championship game, a team they had beaten soundly just a few weeks earlier. So that was the story of his career. He lived on really fine margins compared to his biggest rivals, and if everything didn't go right, you were looking at usually 4 or 5 losses.
All right. Well, now it's Bryan Harsin, and are we going to see a major change in philosophy? Look, head coach aside, did a really good job at Boise State. We know that. But coaching Boise State in a group of 5 out west is a lot different than coaching in the Power 5 in the Southeast for Auburn. So, but still, there's also those offensive philosophies. What's going to be the biggest change, you think? The offensive philosophy change, or just the change in general for Bryan Harsin as a head coach in the South?
Well, he did go out and get 2 coordinators with a lot of SEC experience. Derek Mason, former Vandy head coach, Mike Bobo, who was at Georgia, I think, for around 14, 15 years or so as a coordinator and quarterback coach.
Smart hires.
But I would say, major philosophical changes on offense, especially because Gus ran something that not everybody ran, and he receivers especially have been struggling early on. They've gotten better now, but before they ran one or two different routes, and they just weren't as sophisticated as say most SEC schools or NFL type offenses, and that's been a big adjustment for the receivers and the quarterbacks. And I think Bryan Harsin's also trying to bring in a culture change, more discipline, holding players more accountable, those kind of things you see with a lot of new coaches coming in. But I just think that's his philosophy. That's just the type of attitude he sort of brings as a head coach. So, yeah, I would say it's changed a lot. And I say it's still in the process of changing because I don't think Auburn's going to be close to a finished product.
And, of course, Bryan does have, I don't know how many, I think it's just 1 year of experience in the area coaching Arkansas State. So
right, and that I believe he was he assistant at Texas for a little while too, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yeah, a couple of years there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned Bo Nix. So I can't imagine this is going to be a bad thing for Bo because he just hasn't taken off with Gus Malzahn's offense. So maybe this ends up being a decent change for him. Is there anybody waiting in the wings though?
Actually, yeah, they have done a good job upgrading that position. It had been a position where there was little to no depth during Gus's tenure, but they went out and got T.J. Finley, the transfer from LSU. He started 5 games for them last year. He's a really big, tall, physical kid. First time I saw him walking the athletic complex, I thought he was a tight end or maybe even an offensive lineman. That's how big he is. And he's competing head-to-head with Bo Nix right now. I think Bo is most likely going to win that starting position, but he is giving them competition. He does still have 4 years of eligibility left, so he can not only compete now but be a guy for the future. And then Demetrius Davis, a kid that they did sign in the last class, he's come in and played pretty well. He came in the spring and looked a little rusty, looked like he was sort of just learning and didn't have a lot of confidence, but he's played pretty well this fall so far. So I think they're feeling much better about that position. I do expect Bo to be the starter. I do think Mike Bobo and Bryan Harsin, with their reputations of developing quarterbacks, are going to help him a lot. But I don't think you're necessarily going to see it right away. Auburn does have a schedule where 3 of their first 4 games are against Alabama State, Akron, and
that'll help.
Right, but one of the first big game is at Penn State. Right, they're gonna have a whiteout, and then they start SEC play at LSU and against Georgia. That is a tough way for a new head coach and brand new offense, new defensive coordinator to really start SEC play. So it might be a little bumpy for them early.
Okay. Now, as far as the offense is concerned, the top 3 wide receivers are gone, including Anthony Schwartz, who was drafted pretty early by Cleveland for his speed. They combined for 238 targets last year. The top returning wide receiver only has 15 targets. Elijah Canyon, is he the next wide receiver to keep an eye on? Let's start there because again, there's a lot of inexperience with that group.
There is, and Elijah Canyon had a really good bowl game. Sort of broke out in that game after not really doing much for most of his freshman season. So I think he is a guy to watch this season. The one guy that's really had a good last week or so is Demetrius Robertson. He transferred from Georgia, former 5-star who's originally signed with California, transferred to Georgia for a couple of years.
I remember him.
For his last season, transferring to Auburn. He has been pretty impressive since arriving in camp a little after the start of camp. And so he's one to keep a close eye on. But the reason I think he's most interesting is because last year at Georgia, when they were struggling in the passing game, they needed somebody to step up. He had 12 catches for 110 yards. And for him to go from that to Auburn being, wide receiver 1 or whatever, might tell you a little bit about Auburn's situation at wide receiver. And that's not to knock on Demetrius. Maybe, there were extenuating circumstances we're not aware of at Georgia, and maybe he's going to have a great season in the SEC. I don't want to knock him, but I think that does say a little bit about the situation Auburn has at that position coming back.
Running back, they don't have such a problem, and that is really the strength there with Tank Bigsby. You got a couple of names on this team, by the way, that you really have to like. Offensively, it's Tank Bigsby, who broke out as a true freshman last year.
Yeah, and I've covered some great running backs at Auburn, and he is, if not the best, one of the best.
Wow.
I think he's a special player.
Okay.
I think you build the offense around him. I think he's off to the NFL after next season. I think he's that type of player. Don't necessarily see them as often as you'd like to at Auburn, but he's one of those guys. And if he can stay healthy, Auburn's offensive line, while it struggles in pass pro, got some big maulers up there that can move some people and open up some lanes running the ball, and they got some really good tight ends. So this is an offense really. To me, if this was 2005, right, and you could still win by running the ball and playing good defense, I'd say Auburn's a pretty good team, but I don't think you can do that anymore. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And again, I think it may be a benefit actually because you don't come across those teams anymore.
True.
So you don't practice normally
True.
or prepare for those teams. So you never know. That'll be interesting to find out. But again, you got to get some good quarterback play at some point. Okay, on defense, this is, as you just kind of alluded to, this is the strength of the football team. Statistically, they weren't all that great last year, but there's a lot of talent there. And Derek Mason, if he can really turn his trick, then he's got a lot of interesting players to keep an eye on and to work with, including that secondary with those corners, McCreary, Pritchett, and then they are able to bring in Miller, the transfer from West Virginia.
Yeah. Dreshun Miller probably will start. I think the secondary and the linebackers are the strength of the defense. You got most of your guys back there, and they added some really good transfers, and they got some good young guys coming up too. So they're strong there. And then the defensive line, who I think some people saw as a question mark, has been one of the stars of spring so far. They really like what they're getting production out of that group. Kobe Wooden was not picked first, second, or third team SEC, but I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of, just like running backs, I've seen some really good defensive linemen. He's a special one too. He's an NFL guy.
Okay.
You're going to notice him this fall. He will be all conference by the end as long as he's healthy. He's going to play defensive tackle. Can also move out and play that defensive end, that power defensive end position too. And they've got some other really good defensive linemen. One guy to watch who I think is really interesting is J.J. Pegues.
Okay.
Played tight end and H-back as a true freshman last year. One of those guys that's six. Well, I got him at 6'3", but he's really about 6 foot, over 300 pounds, but just an incredible athlete. And did not play a lot of defense in high school, but they switched him over. I guess it was at the start of or during spring practice, and he has really taken to it quickly. And I think a lot of people see his progress moving faster than they thought it would. And I think we're going to see him contribute this fall.
And you also have a really talented linebacker as well, correct?
A couple of them, Zacoby McClain and Owen Popo, both return as starters there. Zacoby a couple of years ago had the interception return for a touchdown in the Iron Bowl. So he's not a big guy, but he's one of those smaller guys who just runs really well and plays with a lot of intensity, and is a really sure tackler. And then Owen Popo has got just amazing quickness and speed. I think they're going to use him a little bit more attacking the line of scrimmage. And we talked to both linebackers a couple of times this summer and fall. And both of them talked about how they feel like this defense is really built for them, how the defensive line really works, taking up some of those blockers and really frees them up to make plays. So I think they're both really excited about what Derek Mason's bringing.
Okay, now another one of those names, we mentioned Bigsby, Tank Bigsby on offense. How about Smoke Monday, safety on the defense? Because doing some research, he's better used as more of like a free safety, someone in deep coverage, as opposed to up at the line of scrimmage.
Well, last year that's what he was used for. But I think because he is a bigger kid, right, a big-bodied safety, 6'3", I don't know what he weighs now, over 200 pounds, I would imagine. I think they're going to use him more as a box safety.
Okay.
Maybe even as a linebacker against certain teams, because you can't really have a box safety against LSU or Alabama, or some slot receiver that runs a 4.3 is going to run right past you for 6, right? But he's a leader of this defense. I think he's well respected by his teammates. He's pretty skilled cover guy, for a guy who maybe doesn't run a 4.4 or whatever. And he's also a pretty sure tackler in space. So he will be out there for most of the snaps, and they're going to find different ways to use him. And he's also pretty good at attacking the line of scrimmage. So I would not be surprised to see him make some tackles for loss and some sacks this fall.
Okay, now get back to McCreary, because he's considered the top corner on the team. How does he compare to some of the other top corners that the program has had over the years?
They've had a nice little run of corners. Noah Bennogany was a first-round draft pick a couple of years ago. I don't know if Roger's going to reach quite that limit, but he's got that type of ability, right? He's got great, just natural speed. Really works hard. Maybe not the flamboyant cornerback type. Maybe the type that just goes out there and works hard and doesn't talk a lot of trash like some of them do. But I had one coach describe him as their alpha, which says a lot about how much respect he has among his teammates and how hard he works. And yeah, he is a really good player, a guy they feel like they can put on a receiver and sort of let him take care of that and then have more players to cover the other parts of the field.
Okay, now you mentioned the schedule. So Penn State, that's on September 18th. So that is a night game.
Yep.
Okay, it's a whiteout, as you mentioned. I guess the only good thing about the schedule is that the three toughest games are at home and in conference play.
Right.
Georgia, Ole Miss, and Alabama. What do you think? What are you expecting? You expecting bowl season? That's about it. Don't expect much more than that. Or is there an upside? Again, maybe because of the fact that they could run the ball, they can play stout defense, and maybe they could steal a few wins.
I mean, I never want to say they can't because I didn't see it coming in 2013 when they made that run to the national championship game. I didn't see it in, what was it, 1993 when they went undefeated, Terry Bowden's first year. So you can have a first-year coach that sort of has that magic here. But I think this is probably, just from my experience, it's probably like an 8 or 7 win type team, right? But you just never know because, as you said, you get Georgia and Alabama at home, and Auburn can beat those two teams at home. They're not good against them on the road right now. They don't stack up talent-wise with them, but they can beat them in Jordan-Hare Stadium, especially if it's going to be packed out this fall. We'll see about that, right?
Fingers crossed.
But
yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah, I think this is probably a 7 or 8 type win season, but I'm not ruling out anything. The other issue I think you have to take into consideration with Auburn is they have one of the lowest vaccination rates in the SEC right now. As compared to their opponents. So depending on what the rules are for testing and all that, Auburn could be in a tougher situation compared to some of the teams like Ole Miss, whose coach said they're 100%, or Alabama and Georgia, who I think are 95% or better. Wow. That may opt them out of some testing and some different things that Auburn may have to go through, which may in turn cause them to have more positive tests and more guys missing games or missing periods of the season.
Okay, keep an eye on that for sure.
Yep.
Couple of quick things before we let you go, and that's back on Harsin, because for a guy to leave his alma mater, 7 years, a successful run, it had to be, you would think in his eyes, the perfect job. At his press conference and what you've heard from him so far, why do you think he believes that this is the perfect job?
I can absolutely guarantee you he's one of those guys that's super competitive. And I don't know him well, right? Because we're in the COVID still. I've been in front of him just a handful of times for interviews, and those haven't been close up. So there's not that personal relationship I can go by or lean on with other coaches I've had. But so far, just listening to him in press conference and seeing, how he interacts with players and such, he's very driven, very competitive. You can tell he wants to challenge himself against the best coaches, the best teams in the country. I think that's why he's at Auburn.
What's your gut tell you at this point? I know it's early. And like you said, you haven't had a lot of FaceTime with him, but not just him, but just overall the mood of the program since he's been here and just everything that you know about Bryan Harsin. Do you have a good feeling that within a few years, this is going to be everything that they're hoping for when they hired him?
Well, Auburn is never easy. There's always something going on at Auburn, right off the field or whatever. And they're in another situation now where they have they're about to, they're having a president search. The AD right now, Alan Green, is sort of been pushed to the side, and they have another person in the building who's running part of the athletic department.
Okay.
That he should be doing because there's been some real dissatisfaction there. So you got AD that's on his way out, to shorten that up a little bit. And that AD is the guy who sort of went out on his own and hired Harsin without necessarily consulting with some of the big boosters that wanted to go in different directions. Okay. So you've got all this molding together, and then you've got Harsin, who I think in my opinion, is a pretty good coach. I give him an A on just football stuff. right? On just, what he's done in the transfer portal, what he's done with the culture of the program. I give an A on that so far from what I've seen and heard.
Okay.
However, his recruiting is still, it's got to get, got to get a little kick in the tail there. And then you've got this issue now where, with the vaccination things, if something was to go wrong there and something bad happened,
Yes.
right?
That could divide a locker room. It could divide a community.
Right. He could be on a really short stick there at Auburn with a new AD coming in and the boosters feeling one way. So I could see this being one of the shortest tenures of an Auburn coach in history, or maybe a really long one if he can get it going football wise. Because on the football side of it, I think he's doing a lot of things right.
Just quickly, you mentioned that some of the boosters might have wanted to go a different direction. Was there a specific person in mind?
Well, I mean, a lot of them were interested in keeping Kevin Steele. I think it's sort of a caretaker-like coach to get things going a little bit, and then maybe bringing in somebody else. And I think there were some other guys out there they were really interested in. Some bigger name guys they try to go for every year and don't necessarily get.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of wild. Auburn when they get into coaching searches, it's not like a focused one person is in charge. It seems like you've got a booster going this way and a booster going that way. How it just gets a little crazy at times.
And is there your opinion? Do you think they got the right guy based on what was out there?
I'd say that's incomplete so far. I just can't say it. Football, I like what he's doing, but I'm not sure about some of the out the field stuff and the recruiting yet.
Okay.
So I think we're just going to have to wait and see how it goes this next 3 months.
Bryan, I appreciate it. Now, I just want to remind everybody you have a show that you do. Now, this is a weekly show.
It is. We try to do it Tuesday or Wednesday. It's called The Rundown. It's just a podcast we do at auburnsports.com. We all get together, and we try to make it more fun and entertaining just as much as it is giving information,
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Bryan.